The Derinkuyu Expedition, Part 1. Entries taken from the Journal of Eleanor L. Harrow.
Context. Derinkuyu is an ancient underground city in Turkey, carved deep into volcanic rock. It stretches 85 meters below the surface and once housed up to 20,000 people, complete with homes, schools, churches and even stables. Originally built around the 8th century BC, it was later expanded by Byzantine Christians, who eventually abandoned it, leaving the city untouched for centuries. Derinkuyu was rediscovered by accident in 1963, when a man in the Turkish town above it was renovating his home. While knocking down a wall in his basement, he unexpectedly uncovered a hidden tunnel. As he explored further, he realized the tunnel led to a vast, underground, multi-level city buried beneath the earth.
Part 1. The dust had settled in the air, turning the glow of our kerosene lanterns into a muted haze against the ancient stone walls that surrounded us. It had taken longer than expected to find the entrance to the lower levels, and our battery-powered torches had already died. The empty ruins were even more vast than legends had said. The upper levels had already been picked clean by raiders, and the treasures they had taken were now likely scattered across the globe. But what my uncle had uncovered since was something far older. Beneath the known ruins, beneath the already looted corridors, lay yet more levels, older, untouched, unmapped. The Byzantines had sealed these levels off from the outside world many centuries ago and left no record of why. Whatever lay below had remained there, unclaimed, ever since. But now, our small team stood before the sealed passage, the last barrier of rock between the upper and the lower levels of this underground city, and were arguing over how to proceed. Guy Mercer stood tall, arms crossed in frustration, a rugged American, built for adventure. He had the posture of a man who had already decided what was right. You think whoever built this thing left us a neat little door? They buried it for a reason. Dynamite is the only way through. Dr. Miriam Voss was perpetually uneasy and stood rigid with tension, her Spanish accent sharper when frustrated. Destroying the structure risks damaging relics, she argued. The findings we have from the upper levels alone will take months to properly study. Why rush this? But Richard Harrow, my uncle, was not a man driven by patience. He was driven by money. He was a stylish man, wearing tailored expedition clothes that looked more fashionable than practical. He gave Miriam a look that suggested he had tired of the argument, the type of look my family gave to their servants when they no longer wanted to hear their opinion. "Crumbs are all we've been left up here," he said smoothly. "And while I appreciate your concerns, I didn't fund this little venture for an intellectual jolly. No one will pay me for your reports. But they will pay for relics. And deeper means older. That's where the real value is. Down there." He pointed below the surface. Across from him, Haluk Demir, our local guide, stood slightly apart from the group, his eyes locked on the markings carved into the stone floor. He had refused to touch the entrance when we first uncovered it. "We should leave it alone," he muttered. "Some things are buried for a reason." My uncle explained that since they weren't technically there legally, an earlier revelation that had shocked Miriam and amused Mercer, time was of the essence. It was now or never. I remember thinking it felt as though the walls of Derinkuyu were listening to us, as though they had heard conversations like ours before, maybe many times over the centuries. Mercer reached for the detonator. His beloved dynamite was already wired against the stone. Miriam shook her head in disbelief, although she clearly had every intention of venturing inside. Haluk turned away, whispering something I didn't understand, and I just wrote it all down, as much as I could. My uncle had brought me along to document his trip, and preferably to make him sound heroic in the process. So document it I would, much to my horror. Mercer ignited the explosives, and an explosion echoed through the ruins like the sound of an atomic bomb. The result was a large hole carved into the rock floor, and so in we went. The Derinkuyu Expedition, Part 2. We left most of our things on the upper levels, taking only the kerosene lanterns, a few excavation tools, and several padded cases for transporting whatever we found. Mercer was the first to climb through the hole. The rest of us followed after him. The steep decline meant a rope was required to steady our descent. Below, we found more tunnels, similar in size to the ones above, except these were clearly untouched by time, dating back almost 2,000 years. My uncle looked very satisfied with himself. See, I told you there was more to this place. I remember thinking something felt wrong. The lavish tiles from above were now gone. The familiar Byzantine carvings and Christian inscriptions had been replaced by crude etchings clawed into the stone, erratic and unstructured images of figures hunched over, most of them grossly deformed, scratched deep into the rock as though by desperate hands. I had thought Haluk would refuse to join us on the lower levels, but he followed also. Perhaps my uncle's money outweighed his fear. "There is a legend," he murmured. "The original builders of this city were cruel. They forced slaves deep into the earth, so deep they may have survived even after their masters perished." Mercer peered around at many of the broken columns that marked entrances into deeper caverns. "Earthquakes," he declared with great confidence. "Buried them alive, no doubt." Dr. Miriam's fingers hovered over the stone, tracing the uneven carvings that depicted sickness and death. "Disease, perhaps?" she said. "Could explain why people were left down here and intentionally sealed in." Richard barely glanced at the walls. "Does it matter? I can't take the walls home with me." He adjusted his jacket, flicking dust from his sleeve. "The Byzantines sealed this place off, but they did it in a hurry. If treasures were left, we get first dibs." "Maybe it was God's will," Haluk said, "smiting them from existence." Miriam asked him, "You mean the people who were left down here, or the ones who did the leaving?" "Both," Haluk answered. Then I heard it. A soft whisper, threading through the stone and curling through the air. "Can anyone hear that?" I asked. "Yes," my uncle replied. "The wind. The first fresh air in here for over 2,000 years." Ahead, Mercer had already wandered deeper into the chambers. His torch flickered through the dust to reveal something brilliant. A grand altar, covered in gold, gleaming beneath centuries of silence. Mercer peered up in amazement, but I had noticed something too. Bones, scattered around its base, broken and brittle, some stacked, some strewn, as if left there with a deliberate intent. Miriam had noticed them also. "Small animal bones, mostly," she said. "Mostly," Haluk repeated. My uncle raised his arms wide, almost in worship of the altar. "Ladies and gentlemen, may I present to you success?" And then they attacked. The Derinkuyu Expedition, Part 3. Mercer and my uncle wasted no time, hands sweeping across the golden altar, fingers brushing against ornate relics and ancient coins, trying to calculate which was worth the most, but weighed the least. I remember how the treasure glittered beneath the lantern's glow, proof of what we had found beyond the sealed passage. Miriam knelt beside the bones, her brow furrowed as she traced the jagged remains. "These aren't ceremonial," she murmured, half to herself. "They're broken, some shattered." She lifts a larger bone into the light. "Some are human." Haluk stood apart from the group, his voice a whisper, praying in an ancient dialect. A shape caught my attention at the very edge of the lantern's reach. At first I thought it was a trick of the shadows, the uneven stone shifting beneath the glow, but then it stepped forward, hunched and unnatural, with pale eyes staring into the blackness, sniffing the air. It was human, barely. I screamed, The creature lunged, scuttling across the ground like a half-starved, half-crazed animal, its hands acting like forelegs, propelling it forward with surprising speed. I remember being frozen with fear as it leapt forward, clawed hands outstretched toward me, until Mercer tackled it out of the air, slamming the creature's twisted form into the stone. A struggle erupted, with Mercer trying to get a grip around the creature's throat as it clawed at him, shrieking in some half-formed language. Then a second creature erupted from the darkness, barreling toward Miriam. She barely had time to turn before it was on her, bony fingers curling around her arm, teeth snapping dangerously close to her throat. Richard shouted as his own attacker began clawing at his face, long fingernails scraping deep, tearing into his skin. Halleck dug into his backpack and removed a revolver. I later discovered this was Mercer's gun. It was illegal for him to carry in Turkey, so Halleck had hidden it, who now called out, "Mercer!" as he tossed the revolver to the American. Mercer caught the weapon in one hand and didn't hesitate, blasting a hole in the creature's head. Mercer stood over the creature, its body limp, with dark blood pooling beneath it. "Mercer!" Richard's voice called out, his attacker clinging to his shoulder, nails digging deep into his flesh, its mouth biting his throat. Mercer turned, steadied his aim, and fired. The creature let out a guttural cry as the shot tore into its side. It recoiled, staggering backwards, before retreating into the blackness beyond the lantern's reach. Mercer quickly turned his aim to where Miriam should have been, but she was gone. The Derinkuyu Expedition, Part 4. Richard was bleeding badly. Mercer and Haluk carried him between them. The stolen treasures were packed tightly in their sacks, clattering against their backs as they climbed back into the upper levels. It was Richard who spoke first, between painful breaths. "Miriam is gone," he rasped. "We should leave." Mercer's jaw tightened. "Good to know how quickly you'd leave me to die." "It's not leaving," Richard countered, his voice sharp with pain. "If they're already dead." Silence. It was then that I heard it. Amidst the echoes there were whispers threading through the stone. Voices. Most made no sense, but one did. It was faint and trembling, her cadence breaking, but there was no doubt it was Miriam. She was alive, reciting names somewhere down below. The others heard it too this time, and we all listened closely. She was repeating the names of Byzantine emperors, Heraclius, Justinian, Constantine the Great. Her voice was unsteady but rhythmic. A coping mechanism, according to Mercer. Something to hold on to keep her mind intact. I almost laughed in relief. The city was built with ingenious acoustics, Halleck explained, a way for its people to speak underground across great distances. Her voice should get louder the closer we get to her. Mercer began counting his bullets. 10 shots, he muttered. He set the dynamite at Richard's feet. "Light it when we get out," he ordered. "Take down the column next to the hole. Bury us all if we don't make it." Richard nodded weakly. Halleck joined Mercer, and the two men climbed back down the rope and disappeared into the darkness, following the sound of Miriam's voice. I climbed down to the bottom of the rope, holding my barely flickering lantern to light their escape. "I'm sorry, Ellie," my uncle called down from above. "I dragged you into this," he said. "You're the best writer I know. I wanted your words for my story, of how we found this place." "I write fiction," I called back. My uncle let out a strained laugh. "Most non-fiction is fiction." He paused. "I'll make it up to you, I promise." "Then make sure you live," I told him. My eyes then turned to the walls around me. The scratched artworks were barely visible beneath the grime. On closer inspection, the creatures seemed to be in a state of worship. A shield, similar to the large golden one my uncle had taken from the altar, was grasped in their hands, like a sacred relic. The creatures' heads were bowed around it. Had they seen something divine in the depths of the earth? Something they had clung to for centuries, even as their minds and bodies had deteriorated. I shuddered at the thought. Then, gunshots. 6 in rapid fire, followed by silence. I peered into the darkness, but could see nothing. Hopefully, Mercer was reloading. Then, 2 more shots. Mercer had 2 bullets left. Another shot. 1 left. That's when they emerged. Mercer, Haluk, and Miriam, running full tilt out of the darkness. Miriam was wounded, and Mercer was half dragging her along. Behind them, an ungodly number of creatures barreled forward, screeching and crawling over one another in a frantic pursuit. Mercer fired his last shot, hitting the closest creature squarely in the chest, sending it flying backwards. He then tossed his gun to one side and pulled Miriam forward, but they weren't moving fast enough. They weren't going to make it. The Derinkuyu Expedition, Part 5. "The shield! Throw it down!" I shouted up to my uncle. He hesitated, his grip tightening around the ornate shield beside him. Gold inlaid, adorned with intricate designs. It was an undeniably expensive prize, and he didn't want to part with it. "Do it!" I screamed. I could see he wasn't happy about it, but he still threw it down. The shield clattered into the rubble beside me. I quickly hoisted it above my head, standing tall atop the uneven stones, my lantern casting long shadows across the chamber. The charging creatures had become a swarm of pale-eyed horrors, hands scraping against the stone, desperate and ravenous. But then they stopped, suddenly silent, taking deep breaths, similar to Mercer, Haluk, and Miriam, who raced past me, desperately trying to get Miriam back to the upper levels. The creature's pale eyes seemed to stare vacantly at the shield above my head as they slowly knelt around me. Somewhat unceremoniously for poor Miriam, Mercer and Haluk managed to get the doctor back into the upper levels with my uncle. The creatures shuffled closer, their forms hulking and grotesque. Centuries in the dark had twisted them, morphed them beyond recognition. A community once abandoned and left to rot. "Climb, kid!" Mercer shouted. I dropped the shield, and it clattered to the floor, its effect on the creatures unraveling. The kneeling figures now rose, their reverence replaced once more by rage. I scrambled up the rubble using the rope as fast as I could. My heart was pounding. My hands kept slipping, the rope burning my skin. I could hear one of the creatures climbing up behind me. I almost fell in panic, but Mercer and Haluk grabbed me and pulled me up. I was almost through when the creature behind me latched onto my legs, its grip iron tight, dragging itself up with me. Haluk threw his satchel to Miriam. "Please give this to my brother," he asked, before diving forward and tackling the creature that clung to my legs, forcing it back into the abyss and tumbling through the hole after it. Except he didn't, because my uncle, with the last of his strength, grabbed the back of Haluk's shirt, holding him above the hole, his fingers white-knuckled, barely keeping their grip. Below, the creatures screamed, their voices writhing through the darkness, clawing at the stone, desperate to follow us. "Mercer!" my uncle called, his voice strained. "Blow it!" Mercer hit the detonator. It clicked, and an explosion beside us caused one of the columns to collapse forward as a thunderous roar tore through the chamber. Richard and Haluk rolled out of the way at the very last moment as the rock fell, sealing the hole between the 2 levels and sending the abominations back to hell. The Derinkuyu Expedition, Part 6. Mercer chuckled as he ran a hand through his dust-caked hair, his muscles aching. Even Miriam managed something like a smirk, despite the pain in her leg. But it was my Uncle Richard who was grinning the most, his hands resting on the bulging sack of treasures beside him. He promised each of us, even me, our fair share once the sails went through. We had survived, and proceeded to limp back through the tunnels, the darkness behind us finally quiet, until I heard it. A deep, distant banging. I stopped, and my pulse automatically quickened. Another bang, this time closer, causing dust to trickle from the wall beside me. I turned sharply, scanning the stone. The others hadn't noticed yet. They were still walking ahead, exhausted and oblivious. Then, a third bang, louder, more forceful. The stone beside me trembled. "Do you hear that?" I asked the others. The three of them slowed, listening carefully. Another hit shook the wall beside me. They all heard that one. Then again, faster. Boom! 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 Mercer muttered under his breath, "Gimme a break," as he pulled a climbing spike from his pack, gripping it like a weapon. A final blow shattered a chunk of the wall, opening up a hole barely the size of a human head. We held our collective breath, bracing for the worst, until a face appeared, dust-covered, eyes wide, but normal. Recognition sparked in the man's expression. "Haluk!" Haluk exhaled slowly, rubbing a hand down his face. "My brother, Selim," he explained. Miriam let out a short laugh, half exhausted, half incredulous. "Does that mean I can get out here?" Haluk nodded. "We can." Haluk's brother drove us all to the local hospital, but not before my uncle said to Haluk, "Remember, this was your discovery. Yours and your brother's." He leaned toward Haluk. "We were never here, and you'll get slightly more than your fair share. I promise." They shook on it. The end.
Jedi Outlaw, the Ballad of Robin Hood. The Imperial arena is deathly silent. The screams and chaos from moments ago have faded. Now, only the whispers of the unsettled crowd remain, their fear tightening around them like a noose. At the center of the battlefield, Master Robin kneels, surrounded by troopers, bound in electro-chains, his Jedi robes torn and dirtied, his face streaked with the dust of battle. He breathes heavily, sweat dripping from his brow. His fingers twitch, his body straining as he desperately tries to summon the Force, just enough to break his bindings. But nothing comes. At the throne-like chair on the dais, Darth Nottingham scoffs, his cheek still marked by the cut Robin had left him, swirling a goblet of Corellian wine in his hand. His black and silver robes shimmer, his expression one of utter disdain. The Imperial Magistrate, a thin, hawk-faced official with grey eyes like steel, steps forward, holding a datapad. By decree of the Galactic Empire, the former Jedi Knight known as Robin of Locksley stands guilty of the following crimes: treason against the Empire, conspiracy to undermine Imperial rule, theft of Imperial property, inciting rebellion. He lowers the datapad, eyes cold. The sentence is death. Nottingham laughs, standing slowly, savouring the moment. He drains the last of his wine, tosses the goblet aside, and activates his crimson lightsaber, its glow casting flickering red shadows against the walls of the arena. He steps down from the dais, blade humming, approaching the kneeling Jedi. All your defiance, all your rebellion. And yet, in the end, you still kneel. Nottingham raises his saber, poised for the killing stroke.
Context. Robin Hood is one of England's most enduring folk heroes, a legendary outlaw who stole from the rich and gave to the poor. His story dates back to medieval ballads, where he was depicted as a skilled archer and swordsman, leading a band of rebels known as the Merry Men. Traditionally, Robin Hood is said to have lived in Sherwood Forest, opposing the corrupt Sheriff of Nottingham, who enforced harsh laws and taxation on the common people. In this story, Robin Hood has entered the Star Wars universe, set in a galaxy far, far away, where battles rage between the forces of tyranny and rebellion. At the heart of this struggle are the Jedi, warriors of peace, protectors of the innocent, and wielders of an ancient energy called the Force. They stand against the Sith, their dark counterparts who use fear and power to dominate the stars.
Part 1. The Ambush. The imperial city of Kestro gleams beneath the harsh red skies of Vardos. Towering black steel spires rise above the streets, lined with marching stormtroopers, all in perfect formation. TIE fighters streak overhead, their shrieking engines splitting the air. At the heart of the procession, Darth Nottingham leads the way, draped in regal black and silver robes, a smug, self-satisfied grin on his face. He raises his arms dramatically, gesturing to the monuments of imperial greatness, speaking with exaggerated grandeur. The jewel of the Empire, my dear Mariana. A world of discipline, power, and absolute perfection. Beside him, Lady Mariana of Vardos, the most sought-after maiden in the Empire, a vision of elegance and grace. Nobles whispered her name, officers schemed for her favour, but none had truly won her heart. And today, Darth Nottingham intended to change that. Lady Mariana walks with measured grace, her posture impeccable, her expression composed, but distant. Trained in political etiquette, she entertains Nottingham's boastful display, offering neutral responses. But she is utterly unimpressed, her gaze flickering with quiet amusement at his over-the-top attempts to woo her, a combination of imperial arrogance and ridiculous self-flattery. Lady Mariana suppresses a yawn, trying to be polite. Nottingham notices and pauses mid-sentence. "Am I boring you, my dear?" Mariana smiles faintly, shaking her head. "Not at all, Lord Nottingham." Suddenly, a shadow of movement. Mariana's keen eyes catch it, a flicker in the alleyways, a masked figure slipping behind a statue, the faint hum of a hidden blaster powering up. In fact, I fear this tour is about to become much more exciting. Then, chaos erupts. Explosions rock the streets as power generators sputter and die. City lights flicker, imperial banners drop limp, and alarm klaxons blare across Kestro. The merry men strike, descending from rooftops, blasters firing, smoke bombs erupting. Among them, a scarlet-coloured droid, W1L-S CR4, known as Will, draws Nottingham's focus, standing defiant, taunting him with sarcastic wit.
"Oh, Darth Nottingham, cruel and vile. He drinks fine wine, but lacks any style. He taxes the poor, he hoards the gold, yet runs from rebels, so I've been told."
Furious, Nottingham unleashes a brutal force blast, but Will is wired into the generators. The shockwave travels down his connection, snapping critical conduits and sending a wave of disruption across the system. The city's entire energy grid collapses, plunging Kestro into temporary darkness. Through the smoke, a silhouette strides forward, gun in one hand, lightsaber in the other, as Robin Hood emerges. A cocky smirk, a rogue's swagger, and absolute confidence. The fight erupts in full, Robin weaving between blaster bolts, slashing through stormtroopers with elegant saber strokes, taking potshots with his blaster. His merry men cover him, retreating through the chaos. Amidst the firefight, Robin snatches a secure communications cache from Nottingham's belt. The plans for Operation Cinder. Turning to Lady Mariana, he grins. "You sure know how to pick an afternoon stroll, milady." She raises an eyebrow. His rogue's grin infuriating, but undeniably charming. "You always crash diplomatic functions like this?" "Only the ones worth attending," he quips, flashing a grin. Robin suddenly leans in and steals a quick kiss, just as Nottingham roars in fury. Blaster fire erupts anew, but Robin and his merry men are already vanishing into the alleys, escaping with their prize. Nottingham, face twisted in rage, stands amongst the ruins of his grand tour, and as alarms scream across Kestro, he utters 2 words. "Execute them." A nervous, bookish imperial officer hesitates, adjusting his glasses. Who, my lord?" Nottingham whirls on him, eyes blazing. "Everyone!" Part 2. The Last Forest. The hidden forest enclave sits deep in the mountains of Vardos, a rare pocket of greenery left untouched by imperial urbanization. A small rebel camp thrives beneath their branches. Makeshift shelters, weapon crates, scattered datapads displaying imperial transmissions. The air smells of damp earth, charred metal, and the faint spice of Corellian whiskey. Inside a half-collapsed bunker, Brother Tuck hunches over a blinking console, his thick fingers typing rapidly, sweat beading on his forehead. His round frame sways slightly, and the faint jingle of hidden flasks in his robes betrays his reputation, both as a master hacker and as the most devout drinker in the rebellion. Behind him, Robin Hood tosses stolen Imperial gear onto the table, inspecting their haul from the ambush. A set of Imperial officer badges, useless, tossed aside. A stormtrooper's rifle, low on charge, might be worth salvaging. An Imperial-issue plasma knife, sleek, compact, deadly in the right hands. Robin twirls the blade between his fingers, inspecting its weight. A young rebel, barely out of his teens, watches Robin with wide eyes, awe clear on his face, before Robin casually flips the knife through the air towards him. The boy catches it, fumbling slightly, holding it like a sacred artifact. "Thank you, Master Robin." "Just Robin, kid. Titles are for people who want to be remembered. I just want to win." The words hang for a moment, until a rustling from the trees. A worn and dishevelled figure stumbles into the camp, wrapped in tattered clothing, face smeared with dust and sweat. The man, a servant from the Imperial barracks, judging by his torn uniform, falls to his knees, gasping. Nottingham has lost his mind. The merry men exchange glances, stepping closer. "He's planning mass executions," the man stammers. "Anyone suspected of aiding you. Hundreds, maybe thousands. He's rounding them up now." Brother Tuck pauses mid-hack, his fingers hovering over the console. A final keystroke. The screen flickers, then stabilizes, revealing Operation Cinder in grim, merciless detail. Projected planetary devastation, Imperial order codes, mass purges.
Context. Operation Cinder was a posthumous contingency plan devised by Emperor Palpatine to punish the galaxy for failing to prevent his death. It was not just about crushing rebellion, it was about destruction for destruction's sake. Vardos was a target of Operation Cinder, despite being a loyal Imperial world. The planet was known for its strict adherence to Imperial rule, making its selection for destruction a shocking betrayal.
The other rebels watch, waiting. Robin runs a hand through his hair, looking toward the merry men, then back at the shaken Imperial servant. For the first time, the rogue outlaw finds himself out of his depth. This was bigger than rebellion. Bigger than any outlaw's fight. A world was on the brink of annihilation, and he had no clever quip for that. Part 3. The Wrath of Darth Nottingham. The Imperial Command Hall is filled with the hum of administrative chaos. Tactical officers, stormtrooper commanders, and bureaucratic functionaries pace in nervous clusters, datapads clutched tightly, murmuring among themselves. At the centre of it all, Darth Nottingham reclining in his seat, swirling a fresh goblet of wine with absent-minded fury. His jaw is tight, his patience thin, and his mood volcanic. A stormtrooper captain clears his throat. "My lord, after careful consideration, it seems mass executions on this scale pose certain logistical challenges." Nottingham arches an eyebrow, taking a slow sip. "You line them up. You shoot them. It's hardly complex." The stormtrooper exchanges nervous glances with his fellow officers. "Right, of course, my lord. But, logistically speaking, there are thousands. We don't have enough trained firing squads." Nottingham rolls his eyes. "Then use turbolasers. Blast them all at once." A servant droid steps forward, its voice a calm, metallic monotone. "Apologies, Lord Nottingham. Turbolasers require aerial targeting systems that are not reliable this close to the city. Vaporizing civilians en masse could result in infrastructural damage to Imperial assets." Nottingham's eye twitches. "Fine. Use thermal detonators. Stack them like firewood and light them up. An illegal use of military-grade explosives, my lord. Furthermore, disposal of organic remains must follow." "Enough!" Nottingham slams his goblet onto the armrest, wine splashing onto his robe. The stormtrooper captain pauses, rubbing his helmet awkwardly. He suggests alternative methods, listing them with excruciating bureaucratic detail. Some could be fed to the Sarlacc. Elite prisoners could be executed via Rancor. Select figures might face the arena in gladiatorial combat. The rest lined up before firing squads. Nottingham takes a slow breath, his rage momentarily silent. Fine, do it all. Sarlacc, Rancor, blasters, swords, detonators, I don't care. He leans forward, voice dripping with fury. As long as it's a spectacle. At the back of the chamber, Lady Mariana listens, absorbing every word. Nearby, an advisor leans against the shadows, arms crossed, an older man, weathered, a former member of a quiet rebel order. His movements are deliberate, his mind sharp, calculating. Mariana turns to him, voice hushed. Nottingham threatens executions often, but rarely does he follow through. The advisor studies the chaos, nodding slowly. He will this time. Why? The advisor leans away from the wall. Because this isn't just about control. It's about pride. He was embarrassed by Robin in front of you. Mariana folds her arms. What do the people think? The advisor glances toward the distant corridors, where city officials and workers pass by, whispering, nervous, avoiding eye contact. They are fearful, and fear makes people silent. Then, a metallic whirring sound. A figure steps through the doorway, his rust-colored plating catching the dim light. At first glance, he appears just another Imperial service droid, his chassis marked with standard identification codes, his stance neutral, unassuming. But this is W1LSCR4. The droid pauses, then lifts something. A data cylinder, its soft blue glow pulsing in his hands. Part 4. The arena. The Imperial arena, normally a training ground for stormtrooper drills, is transformed into a spectacle of terror. Thousands of prisoners are paraded through, bound in chains, faces drawn with fear. They are Imperial bureaucrats, soldiers, highborn citizens, politicians, lowborn workers, all accused traitors, now forced to face the wrath of Darth Nottingham. The onlookers, ordered to attend, stand frozen, unwilling to meet the prisoners' gazes. The murmur of tense whispers flickers through the crowds, swallowed by the oppressive march of stormtroopers lining the arena's perimeter. Nottingham watches from his throne-like seat. He leans forward, scowling. Why is this taking so long? A servant droid steps forward, its voice calm, programmed for efficiency. Lord Nottingham, you requested a spectacle. Public executions must be properly staged for maximum psychological impact. Nottingham's patience snaps. With a flick of his wrist, he unleashes the force, hurling the droid off the command stand. It crashes into the ground below, sparking uselessly. A brass band begins playing, only for Nottingham to snap his fingers, cutting them off mid-note.
Get on with it.
A hush falls as the doors to the arena open. From the darkness, a hooded figure emerges. His steps are slow, deliberate, the stormtroopers tense, fingers hovering over blaster triggers. The prisoners stare, whispering among themselves. The crowd shifts uneasily. The figure reaches the center, stops, and throws back the hood, revealing the face of Robin Hood, dressed now in full Jedi robes for the first time in years. A murmur of shock and awe spreads through the arena. Robin stands tall, his saber hanging at his belt, his presence a call to honor, invoking the age-old battle between Jedi and Sith, a conflict that had raged across centuries, across worlds, across history. He meets Nottingham's gaze. Let them go. I'll take their place. He pauses, then gestures toward Nottingham himself. Or we settle this. Jedi against Sith, in single combat. Nottingham stares, then chuckles darkly. He signals to his officers and stormtroopers step back, creating an open space in the middle of the arena. Nottingham descends onto the sand, his boots kicking up dust as he approaches. He removes his outer cloak, his crimson saber humming to life, then signals for his troops to take aim.
Tell me, Outlaw, did you really think I'd duel scum like you?
Robin grins, eyes sharp with mischief. No, but it's funny you thought I would. And then, before Nottingham can react, Robin moves. A flash of motion, a quick-draw blaster shot, fast as lightning. The bolt streaks toward Nottingham's face, but at the last second, he jerks his hand up, deflecting the shot with a wild blast of force energy, but not stopping it entirely. A small line of red appears on his cheek, a shallow cut, just enough to mark him. Nottingham's eyes darken, his fury shifting into something colder, crueler. Then the merry men strike. Blaster fire erupts from the edges of the arena, picking off stormtroopers with precise shots. Explosive charges burst open containment gates, releasing rampaging Acklays, vicious Nexu predators, and feral Rathtars into the battlefield. A thunderous roar shakes the ground as beasts charge into the chaos. But the Rancor remains in its reinforced cage, too well trained, too disciplined, too loyal to Imperial handlers to be freed. The battlefield descends into absolute carnage. Robin fights through the chaos, deflecting blaster bolts with his saber, weaving through the melee with his signature outlaw swagger, trying to get another shot at Darth Nottingham. But this time, the fight turns against him. Stormtroopers tighten ranks, cutting off the merry men. The prisoners remain trapped, unable to flee. And then, the ground shakes. A massive steel cage door slams open, releasing Nottingham's trained execution beast, the towering, battle-worn Rancor. The crowd gasps, recoiling in horror. The Rancor charges forward, its chains snapping free. Robin whirls, raising his saber, only for the beast to slam into him, knocking him off balance. It seizes him in one massive fist, lifting him effortlessly into the air, squeezing tight. Robin grimaces, struggling, his breath stolen. Nottingham steps forward, watching with amusement. Robin glances down at him, pain twisting through his frame, but his smirk remains. "I gotta say, you've always looked good in red," referencing the cut on Nottingham's cheek. Nottingham growls, signalling to the Rancor, and with one final motion, the beast slams Robin into the ground, his vision fading to black. Part 5. The Truth. The Imperial arena is deathly silent. The screams and chaos from moments ago have faded. Now, only the whispers of the unsettled crowd remain, their fear tightening around them like a noose. At the center of the battlefield, Master Robin kneels, surrounded by troopers, bound in electro chains, his Jedi robes torn and dirtied, his face streaked with the dust of battle. He breathes heavily, sweat dripping from his brow. His fingers twitch, his body straining as he desperately tries to summon the Force, just enough to break his bindings. But nothing comes. At the throne-like chair on the dais, Darth Nottingham scoffs, his cheek still marked by the cut Robin had left him, swirling a goblet of Corellian wine in his hand. Nottingham laughs, standing slowly, savouring the moment. He drains the last of his wine, tosses the goblet aside, and activates his crimson lightsaber, its glow casting flickering red shadows against the walls of the arena. He steps down from the dais, blade humming, approaching the kneeling Jedi. All your defiance, all your rebellion, and yet, in the end, you still kneel. Nottingham raises his saber, poised for the killing stroke. Then, a crackle of static. Torchlight flickers as holographic projections shimmer to life, casting Lady Marienna's image across the arena walls, her regal form standing tall. Her voice rings out, clear and commanding. "People of Vardos, Darth Nottingham has lied to you all." Murmurs ripple through the crowd. Nottingham turns sharply, his brow furrowing, rage flickering across his face. Marienna continues. "This is not about traitors. This is not about rebellion. This is about the Empire's wrath, about the Emperor's decree. Vardos has already been condemned." Gasps. Shock. Fear. The murmurs grow louder. Then, the projections shift. The walls of the arena become screens, displaying classified Imperial files, revealing the full scope of Operation Cinder. Orbital bombardment patterns. Entire cities marked for destruction. Imperial orders, signed by high-ranking officials, confirming the planet's fate. Trooper deployment schedules, showing that even Imperial soldiers stationed here are considered expendable. Marienna presses on, her tone firm but urgent. Operation Cinder is already in motion. The planet is marked for destruction. Its cities are to be burned, its people slaughtered. The crowd erupts, a wave of confusion and panic sweeping through the onlookers. "Nottingham was never here to save you. He was meant to marry me, take what he wanted, and flee while the rest of you burned. Nottingham steps forward, teeth clenched, his patience snapping. "Silence her!" he snarls. Stormtroopers hesitate, some looking toward their own ranks, realization dawning, many of them also marked for death. Suddenly, a movement near Robin. The young rebel from earlier working frantically. His hands shake, but he finds the release mechanism, and Robin's electrochains snap open. Robin inhales sharply, his wrists burning from the restraints. Nottingham notices. He reaches out with the force, and in that moment, he feels it. The shift in the tide, the fear turning into anger. The loyalists hesitating, the Imperial ranks fracturing, Nottingham knows. Without another word, he turns and runs, his limited loyalists scrambling after him. Some stormtroopers raise their blasters, aiming at the retreating soldiers. Robin lifts his hand. "Hold fire," he orders. The soldiers hesitate, but they obey. Robin stands amidst the wreckage. The loyal stormtroopers have scattered, vanishing into the city streets, their leader fleeing like a wounded predator. The people of Vardos now know the truth, but knowing isn't enough. They needed a way out. Robin pulls a small comms device from his belt, its worn casing scratched from years of use. He activates the secure frequency, his thumb pressing deep into the old dial. His voice is steady.
"Azim, I need a miracle."
The signal sends out into the galaxy, disappearing into the vast unknown.
The end. The Doorman's Dilemma. Part 1. The town stood in eerie silence, a place where sickness lingered like an unshakable shadow. Smoke curled upward from distant pyres, the last remains of those who had succumbed to the plague. The streets were empty, doors bolted shut, windows dark, as if the town itself was afraid to breathe. At the gate, the wood was scarred from the desperate hands that had pounded against it before being turned away. A small sliding panel, its edges worn smooth, was the only connection to the outside world. It groaned open, revealing the figure beyond. She stood cloaked against the cold, her hood drawn low. "You have to let me in," she said, and he felt something tighten in his chest. He should have known she would come eventually. "No one comes inside," he answered, his voice firm, though the weight of his decision pressed against him like the smoke hanging over the town. A pause stretched between them, heavy with things unsaid. She reached up, pulling back her hood, revealing familiar features. Her eyes searched his face, pleading. "I'm not sick," she whispered. His grip on the wooden panel tightened, nails digging into the splintered surface. "You know I can't," he said, voice steadier than he felt. She stepped forward, pressing a hand against the gate. "We weren't married long, I know," she said, her voice shaking. "But what we had, it was good, wasn't it? You are a good man. Please let me in." His jaw clenched, his body rigid against the wooden frame, as though any sign of weakness would betray him. "I regret this more than you know," he finally said. She inhaled sharply, her breath visible in the cold. Then, with quiet desperation, she tried again. "I'm pregnant." The words hit like a blow, but his expression did not change. "You're lying," he said, though he wished he could believe her. Her lips trembled, but she did not deny it. She simply waited, hoping, but he had already made his choice. Slowly, he reached for the panel and slid it shut. The lock clicked into place. On the other side, she exhaled, her breath swallowed by the wind. Inside, he let his forehead rest against the gate, his fingers curled against the cold wood. The town remained silent, waiting, holding its breath, unaware from which darkened corner the plague would emerge next.
Context. The Black Plague, also known as the Black Death, swept across medieval Europe in the 14th century, wiping out nearly half of the population. Cities collapsed under the weight of death. Trade routes emptied and entire villages vanished. leaving only silence where life once thrived. In this story, the plague does more than simply claim lives. It lingers, twists, and corrupts, turning the afflicted into something beyond death. Our doorman waits, not just for sickness, but for the horrors that will follow in its wake.
Part 2. The town never truly slept. Even in the deep hours of the night, the scent of burning wood mixed with rot, bending through the streets like a silent warning. A flickering lantern here, a hushed murmur there, but mostly nothing. Silence was the safest sound. The doorman stood at the gate, the heavy wooden frame pressing against his back, his grip firm on the latch. He was the one who watched when the others closed their doors, the one who stood while the town dared to rest. Then, footsteps, soft, hesitant, stopping just short of the gate. He knew before she even spoke. "You have to let me in," she said, quieter than before. He swallowed hard but didn't open the panel. "You cannot be sure," he said. "It takes days for symptoms to show, and once it does, you wouldn't even know yourself anymore. You would tear my throat out as soon as look at me." For the first time, there was anger in her voice. "There are madmen in the woods," she said. "They aren't infected, just desperate, wild-eyed, starving. I can't stay out there. I won't last." His fingers curled against the wood, but he did not move. "I can't let you in," he said again. A long silence stretched between them, colder than the night itself. Then her voice softened. "Bring me grain," she said. "If you won't let me in, at least help me to live." He exhaled slowly. "I will bring grain tomorrow." She did not thank him. She did not argue. She simply turned and left, her shadow dissolving into the darkness beyond the gate. The next evening, the doorman stepped into the town, the lanterns dim, the air thick with distrust. He kept close to the walls, watching for movement, listening for voices. A guard was stationed outside the grain house. But he was distracted, speaking with a merchant. The merchant was one of the last to enter before the gates were sealed, a traveler who had seen places beyond these dying streets. "They've done it," the merchant said, his voice edged with confidence. "The Isle of Dunharrow is safe. They found a way to check for illness, but they don't offer passage freely." The guard frowned. "How do they test?" The merchant shrugged. "They don't say. But whatever it is, it works. No infection has reached them. The island is untouched. If you want entry, you need gold, though, and plenty of it." The guard shook his head, muttering something bitter about fortune favoring the cruel. The doorman moved carefully around the side of the store and reached for a sack of grain. He lifted it with careful precision, pressing it against his chest to keep the weight from shifting. Then, a sound behind him, a cough, deep, rattling. He froze, listening. A door sat slightly ajar, shadows flickering inside. Someone inside was sick. The question was, how sick? Part 3. The town was changing. Standing at his post, the doorman listened carefully, his breath steady, his pulse slow, counting the sounds carried by the wind. There had been whispers before, hushed conversations behind locked doors. But now, it was something else. A cough. Stifled, strangled, but undeniable. Then another. Somewhere close, the sickness was moving. He pushed the thought away when footsteps approached the gate. She was there, hood drawn, looking smaller against the wooden frame than she had the night before. The weariness in her stance, the way her shoulders sagged, the way her fingers trembled. Her cloak was dirt-streaked, the fabric stiff from exposure, and her face paler than he remembered, thinner, as if the nights outside had stolen something from her. "I already left it outside," he said, referring to the grain before she could ask. Her shoulders eased slightly. "Thank you," she whispered, sounding grateful, truly grateful for the first time. He hesitated, then asked, "Have you heard of the Isle of Dunharrow?" She nodded. "But it's far. You need a strong boat," she said. "And it costs money to get in," he told her, "and more than most can afford." She sighed, already knowing where this conversation was leading. He would offer to pay to send her there. "I'll bring some gold," he said. "Tomorrow night." She nodded. "And I'll join you." She stared at him, silent, uncertain, the weight of his words taking longer to settle than expected. "You'll leave? You'll really leave?" Her hand reached through the latch. He took it, holding it between both of his own, warmth pressing against cold metal. They lingered there. Then she pulled away, and he let her go. The town had no banks, no vaults, only hiding places, known by few. The doorman walked through the streets carefully, never too fast, never too slow. He knew where the gold was. It was hidden at the back of the church, sealed beneath the stone lid of a tomb, untouched for years. Difficult to lift, but not impossible. A guard stood watch nearby, though his stance was slack, his head low. The doorman waited, hidden in the shadows, listening, watching. The guard coughed, then staggered, barely staying upright. He took a long breath, then another, swaying as he steadied himself. The fever had him. It was only a matter of time now. The doorman watched without emotion, waiting for the moment when the guard would finally collapse, when his body would betray him completely. And when that moment came, the doorman stepped silently over the guard's fevered body. The tomb at the back yielded with grim acceptance, the heavy stone lid shifting, releasing a breath of stale air into the cold night. Inside, the treasures lay waiting, and he gathered them in silence, filling a cloth sack until the weight was nearly too much to carry. Carefully, he lowered the stone lid back into place, pressing it down, adjusting it until it sat as it had before. He hoped no one would check before he had time to flee. By the time he emerged, the sky was turning pale, the first hints of daylight creeping across the rooftops. He moved quickly, making his way home, but the town was waking, the sickness stirring with it. Coughs echoed through the streets, deep, dry, unnatural. One by one, doors creaked open, tired faces emerging in the half-light, eyes hollow, lips pale. The town was changing, and he was running out of time. Part 4. The doorman didn't sleep. Through the thin walls of his home, he listened to the town unravel. The coughs had multiplied, spreading like whispers through the streets, growing louder, more desperate. He felt fine, but he kept his shutters closed, unwilling to risk a stray breath of sickness, unwilling to let prying eyes glimpse the stolen treasures hidden beneath his floorboards. Day stretched into evening, the light fading, the air thick with dread. Then, as the last traces of sunlight disappeared, the screams began. He had to move quickly. Grabbing his hoard of gold, he stepped out into the streets, keeping to the least trodden paths, slipping between shadows, avoiding the places where the sick might linger. Then, a collision. He turned a corner and crashed into someone, the force knocking the sack from his grip. Gold spilt onto the ground, coins rolling into the cracks between the cobblestones. But the other man did not react. He simply stared. The doorman knew him, or at least had known him once, but that man was gone. What remained was something else, entirely. His skin was ashen, his eyes hollow, his breath shallow and uneven. His fingers twitched, as though his body no longer understood how to move. He was more monster now than man. The doorman didn't wait. He gathered as much gold as he could, stuffing it back into the sack. The sick man didn't move. He simply watched as the doorman ran. The gate loomed ahead, the wooden frame solid and unyielding. He reached for the latch, sliding it open. She was there. Her face appeared in the gap, her eyes wide with disbelief. "You came," she whispered. He nodded, saying nothing, as he began passing the gold through the latch, one piece at a time. Behind him, the town collapsed into chaos. Screams, attacks, death. The doomed did not live long after they turned, a day at most, but in that time, they would tear through everything. She pressed her hands against the gate, urgency in her voice. "You have to leave," she said. "Now." But he did not move. "The town is done for," he said. "If I open the gate, they will chase, and we will both die. Go to Blackmere Port," he told her. "Barter passage to Dunharrow. Do not wait for me." More screams behind him. He glanced back, gripping the gate tightly. "Go!" he ordered. "I will hold back the heathens." Her breath hitched, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Then she ran. She did not look back. As she fled into the night, the sounds of screaming and fighting and death followed her, chasing her into the unknown. By morning, the streets were silent again, save for the smouldering ruins and the bodies left behind. But the gate remained unopened. The doorman had done his duty. The end. La Petite Lune felt quiet today. Too quiet. The last French bakery in Gaza, they tell me. I had arrived early to watch the sunrise through the window, to see the light rising over streets that were emptier than they used to be. The bookstore next door was gone, its shelves now bare. The tailor had disappeared too, and the grocer, the one who swore business would return, had finally given up. With my own customers now starting to dwindle, I wondered for the first time if I should do the same. And then the bell rang as the door opened, and in she walked. Sharp footsteps, crisp fabric, and the kind of confidence that only comes from knowing too much about the world. She was not alone. 3 colleagues in tailored suits, voices spilling over their coffee orders, talk of borders and negotiations thick in the air. They barely glanced at me, standing behind the counter as they paid and sat at a table in the corner. I almost forgot to ask, "Would you like a pastry?" She was the only one who looked up, a twinkle in her eyes. "Sure. Surprise me." I reached for the best of what was left in the cabinet, a simple madeleine, soft, golden, unremarkable, not good enough for her, but all I had to offer. She took it from me without a second glance, and soon enough, she was leaving. I watched her go, the sound of her heels fading into the street, and yet suddenly the bakery didn't feel so quiet anymore, and that night I baked differently. Dark chocolate tarts dusted with silver sugar that chased the sparkle in her gaze. A twisted brioche with rose honey glaze that captured the loose strands she tucked behind her ear. A puff pastry with cream, crisp on the outside, but melting within, like something too delicate for the world outside. I pray I get to see her again. 1 week later. She returned. Same time, same people, same sharp footsteps, same whirlwind of important conversations. She ordered her coffee. "A pastry?" I asked her. She smiled, surprised me. I had the rose eclair ready, delicate, perfect, a message in sugar. She took a bite. And then, a glance. A fleeting, curious glance in my direction. My body reacted before my brain, and I ducked behind the coffee machine. I am embarrassed to say it was not casual, not graceful. I threw myself out of sight like a soldier avoiding sniper fire, and before I knew it, she and her team had gone. But each week they returned. Each time I baked something better than before, as though my pastries were competing for her attention, fighting to be noticed. I long for that single moment when she might pause and wonder who exactly was making them. And today, something changed. She ordered coffee for her entire team, gesturing for them to sit while she lingered at the counter. She asked about the bakery. How long had I been here? What was my favorite pastry to make? I answered as calmly as possible, burning my hand on the espresso machine in the process. But the magic of her words was cut tragically short. A member of her team received a phone call. A flicker of urgency rippled through them. She needed to go. She reached for her coffee, and I slid the pastry into a bag and across the counter. And our hands touched. For just a second. But long enough. A current ran through my fingertips, sharp as citrus, warm as fresh dough, ridiculous, impossible, and entirely real. She didn't react. Or maybe she did? A slight pause. Was I imagining it? She was gone before I could process it. And now, sitting here, staring at my scribbled notes and the smell of butter lingering in the air, I must admit the obvious. Mon Dieu, I think I'm in love. For her next visit, I will create something perfect. A pastry that holds every glance, every question, never asked. But first I must find the ingredient. Orange blossom water. Delicate, fragrant, it turns simple dough into something unforgettable. But in this city, it had become rare. A luxury slipping away like everything else. I set out early, walking through familiar streets that no longer felt familiar. The first shop was now gone. The sign still swung above the door, but the shelves inside were bare. The owner, someone I'd known for years, had left without a word. The second shop was also closed, shutters drawn, a dust-covered counter visible through the cracks. I kept walking. The city folded around me. Buildings with missing walls, echoes of voices that had vanished. But still, I searched. And at last, I found the old spice merchant. He sat among packed crates, hands wrapped around a porcelain teacup, as if holding on to the last piece of home. "You're still baking?" he asked, his voice worn. For a moment he hesitated, then sighed. From deep within his belongings, he pulled out a small glass bottle, the last of the orange blossom water. "Take it," he said. "No charge." I held the bottle like something sacred. He didn't say goodbye. He simply closed the shutters, his own final chapter now written in the dust. I returned to the bakery. Tomorrow, I will create the greatest pastry I have ever made, and I will see if she notices. Morning came. This was it. I had whisked the eggs until they folded like silk, kneaded the dough with the kind of care only love can grant, measured every detail, not as a baker, but as a man carving something precious from nothing. The scent of butter and orange blossom filled La Petite Lune, rising, spreading, lingering in the air as if waiting for her. The coffee machine whirred. The door remained closed. She did not arrive, nor did her team. No sharp footsteps, no hurried conversations, no quiet request for surprise. I told my regulars, "It's already reserved," when several asked for my greatest creation. Hours passed. The pastry sat alone, untouched, waiting. By evening, the bakery had never felt so empty. I turned the sign from open to closed, hands lingering on the glass. I was not sure I would ever turn it around again. By nightfall, the sky was lit up in the distance. Bursts of fire, flickers of something both beautiful and terrible. I wondered where she was. I fell asleep inside the bakery that night, until a knock at the window the following morning woke me. A young man, An intern, apparently, barely old enough to look important, ordering a coffee with no sense of the weight of the moment, as he casually placed a note on the counter from his boss. And I finally learned her name. She has been sent elsewhere for a while, but will return to Gaza in the spring, and that she cannot wait to see me again. No reference to pastries. It was me she looked forward to seeing. I slid the greatest pastry ever made across the counter. For you, a reward. He looked confused but took it, and then chomped it down within 3 bites, gave me a thumbs up, and left. For a moment, I hoped a stray bullet would hit him on his way out. But then I forgave him. For today, I bake. The end. The killing moon. The override lever would blast Buzz into the abyss. Neil's fingers curled around it. Buzz Aldrin stood inches away, his voice crackling through the comms. "Neil? What are you doing?" Buzz took a step forward. Neil saw it. The glint in his eyes, the whispered name in the dark. His heartbeat thundered inside his suit. Neil took a slow breath. And then he pulled the lever. Buzz screamed, and the silence swallowed him whole.
Context. In July 1969, the world was locked in the Cold War, a bitter ideological struggle between the United States and the Soviet Union. The race to the moon became a symbol of technological supremacy, and Apollo 11 was the mission that would make history. 3 men embarked on this journey: Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins. Neil and Buzz set foot on the moon while Collins remained in lunar orbit, ensuring their safe return. Humanity was to take its first step into the cosmos. But what no one knew was that the moon was watching, and something was waiting, and Buzz Aldrin had had a bit of hanky-panky with Neil Armstrong's wife.
Part 1. The Whispered Betrayal. Neil had always been careful, controlled, methodical, but Buzz Aldrin was not. The press conferences should have been routine, a parade of flashing cameras, rehearsed lines about courage and the spirit of exploration. Yet, every time Neil glanced at Buzz, something unsettled him. Buzz thrived under the spotlight. He laughed easily, his confidence radiating like a beacon, drawing the reporters in with his sharp smiles and bold quips. And Janet, Neil's wife, was drawn to him too. She wasn't mesmerized, not exactly, but her eyes lingered too long when Buzz spoke. Her laughter came too easily when he joked. A hand on his arm, a casual touch. Too casual. Neil had noticed it months ago at the gala. Buzz had leaned in, whispered something to Janet, and her expression had changed. A smile, then something quieter, something unreadable. Neil had never asked what was said. Now, standing under the bright television lights, answering questions about the greatest journey in human history, he couldn't stop thinking about it. The doubt festered. And with every passing day, every launch rehearsal, every fleeting glance, every whisper between Janet and Buzz, the feeling grew stronger. Soon, Buzz wouldn't just have Janet's attention. Soon he'd have the moon, too. And Neil couldn't let him take both. Part 2. The Moon's Whisper. Neil stood outside, the night pressing against him, the air thick with anticipation. The launch was close now. Too close. His hand rested on the railing, his gaze drifting skyward. The moon. It hung there, impossibly distant yet painfully near, bathing the world in silver light. It was silent, cold, waiting, a great eye staring back at him through the void. And yet, something stirred beneath that silence. He blinked. For a moment, the world tilted, the shadows stretching unnaturally long. The hum of distant machinery faded, the voices from the control center muffled into nothing. Only the moon remained. Something inside him tightened. A pull, a pressure. Not fear, not awe, but recognition. Then a whisper, soft as breath, low as distant thunder. His pulse stilled. The voice spoke, threading through his skull, curling around his thoughts like the coils of a serpent. You will come to me. Neil's breath hitched. He stepped back. The whisper followed. You will bring him. The shadows shifted, long fingers stretching from the base of the platform, reaching across the metal, curling toward him. He tore his eyes away, heart hammering in his chest, forcing himself to turn, to move, to flee before it could say more. But as he walked away, he knew. The moon was waiting, and it already had a claim on him. Part 3. The Violent Ascent. The shuttle shook. Everything shook. Neil braced against his seat, hands clenched, eyes fixed ahead as the vibrations rattled through his bones. The ignition roared, the deafening, primal howl of power surging beneath them. The pressure hit first. His chest crushed inward, pinned by the force, like an invisible fist shoving him back. Every breath felt stolen, fought for. Then the heat, a blistering intensity rising from the engines, the metal groaning, the world shrinking below. A deep, grinding howl ripped through the cabin as they pierced the sky, cutting through layers of atmosphere at speeds the body wasn't meant to endure. Air became thicker, then thinner, then silence. The violence ceased. The crushing weight vanished. Neil inhaled, a slow, steady pull of breath. His limbs felt weightless, his body floating between control and surrender. Then he saw it. The moon, suspended in the void, waiting, watching. For the first time in months, maybe years, the tension in his chest loosened. The endless pull, the quiet murmur in his thoughts, the growing obsession. It all made sense now. He was going home. Neil let out a slow breath, his lips parting in something close to a smile. Then Buzz spoke. "Oh, man." Buzz laughed, his voice too loud, too eager, shattering the fragile quiet. "Can you believe it? We're on our way, Neil. Look at that view." Neil's jaw clenched. Buzz grinned, eyes wide, excitement bursting from him like a child on Christmas morning. Neil hated that grin. It was too sharp, too cocky, teeth too even, too white, perfect in a way that made him sick. Buzz had that face, the kind that belonged on the covers of magazines, the kind that Janet liked. Strong jaw, charming smirk, confident without trying. Neil stared at him, at the way Buzz leaned forward, soaking in the view, taking up space like he owned it. Like he owned everything. His voice grated too, smooth, easy, charismatic. The kind that charmed crowds, disarmed suspicion, turned every conversation into a performance. Janet had always liked men like that. Men who stood in the light while Neil remained in the shadows. His fingers twitched. Buzz kept talking, kept laughing, kept stealing this moment. Neil swallowed back the sharp taste of resentment. They were headed to the moon. And soon, very soon, Buzz wouldn't be talking anymore. Part 4. The Welcome of the Void. Neil stepped onto the lunar surface. The ground beneath his boots was soft, ancient, untouched except by the silence of space. The moment should have felt alien, distant, like stepping into history. But it didn't. It felt right. The stillness embraced him, the vast, endless horizon, the pure, undisturbed quiet of a world frozen in time. The moon had waited for him. And now, he was home. His breath came slow, measured, deliberate. Then he saw it. A shadow. Not his. Not Buzz's. Long. Unmoving. Stretched unnaturally against the surface. Not a trick of the light. Something else. The pull returned, deep in his chest. A welcome. He turned away. There was work to do. The mission had begun. NASA's checklist was clear. Document, sample, analyze. Buzz was already moving, collecting soil samples, placing instruments in the dust, seismometers to detect lunar tremors, retroreflectors to measure distance between Earth and the Moon. Every step, every movement was calculated, rehearsed, history in the making. Neil watched him. Watched the easy confidence, the excitement, the way Buzz moved as though this mission was his. The way Janet looked at him flashed through Neil's mind again. Neil turned his gaze to the module's controls. The lever. He had access to an override. The design was simple, a safety function built into the module. In case of emergency, in case of failure, in case an astronaut needed to be sent into the abyss. His hand hovered over the lever. Buzz was right there. One pull, 1 second, and he'd be gone. Neil's fingers curled. His breath was shallow inside the helmet, the weight of the suit pressing against his chest. Then doubt crept in. What if he was wrong? What if it had all been in his head, the glances, the whispers, the way Buzz took up space? What if Janet's smile had been nothing? His mind wrestled with itself. Then Buzz laughed. Hell of a place, huh? His voice crackled through the comms. I bet Janet would have loved to see this. Neil's grip tightened. The world tilted. Buzz shouldn't have said that. The tension in Neil's chest snapped. He pressed the lever. Buzz screamed, and the silence swallowed him whole. Part 5. The hollow return. The crowd roared. The banners waved. Neil Armstrong, the first man on the moon, stepped onto the runway, the weight of Earth pressing against him once more. The cameras flashed. The hands reached out. Voices called his name. A sea of admiration, applause, history unfolding in real time. He had completed his mission. Just not the one he had been assigned. Janet was waiting for him. Her eyes wet, her hands trembling as she reached for him. He embraced her, feeling the warmth of home, the finality of it all. Then Buzz stepped forward. The cheers swelled again, though something was off. Buzz waved, nodded, moved through the crowd as expected, but the spark was gone. The charm had disappeared. The easy grin, the magnetic pull, the effortless confidence, gone. He was functional, precise, correct, like a machine performing its duty. The women in the crowd no longer lingered when they looked at him. Janet didn't smile at him. He didn't smile back. For a moment, Neil almost felt relief. Then Buzz turned his head, and Neil froze. For just a fraction of a second, a flicker, a breath, an instant too quick to grasp, Buzz's eyes were black. Not dark, black. Empty. Neil blinked. Buzz had already looked away, shaking hands, nodding at officials, stepping forward into history as if nothing had changed. But Neil knew. Something had changed. Something had been left behind on the moon, and something else had come back in its place. The end. Mission Impossible, Outbreak. Part 1. Ethan Hunt descends fast, controlled, precise. The wind tears past his suit, his oxygen mask fogging slightly as he approaches the towering steel and glass monolith below. A lone skyscraper in the desert, owned by shell companies but known to those in intelligence circles. Benji speaks through a comms device in his ear. "All right, Ethan. Our insider confirms the deal is in progress. Bioweapons are on the table. 3 buyers, plus security. No visuals yet on the cellar." Ethan adjusts his trajectory, activating his magnetic grip just before impact, and his body slams into the smooth glass, silent, calculated. Below him, through the reinforced penthouse windows, Ethan can see the deal is unfolding. The penthouse is ultra-modern, minimalist, and suffocatingly clean, with marble floors, black steel fixtures, and a long meeting table at the center. The sellers arrived by helicopter. The buyers are 3 men in tailored suits, looking cold and businesslike. They lean forward, expressions tight with scrutiny. The sellers are 2 figures clad in black tactical gear, ex-military types who stand stiffly, watching with unreadable faces. A reinforced case sits between them, matte black, heavily secured, and the source of all tension in the room. "I've got eyes on the deal." "Benji, what exactly are we talking about here?" Benji is hesitant. "Ethan, it's bad." Ethan watches the body language in the room change. The buyers glance at each other, stiffening slightly. The sellers remain too still. Ethan watches carefully. Define bad. It's not just a virus. It hijacks brain functions, overrides rational thought, turns people into crazed, violent, feral eaters. Ethan narrows his eyes, monitoring movement inside. The case is still closed, but hands are hovering near it now. Ethan watches. Something is wrong. Inside, the tension breaks. The buyers shift abruptly, hands moving toward the case. One of them speaks, fast, clipped, urgent. Ethan doesn't hear it, but he sees the panic. "Benji, something's happening. The buyers, they're panicking. The case is open. Why would they be opening it mid-sell?" Doesn't make sense. Ethan thinks quickly, eyes darting between the figures inside. The sellers haven't reacted. They're just standing there. Too calm. Whoever arranged this deal isn't here. The sellers, they aren't here to negotiate. They're here to detonate. Then an explosion erupts inside the penthouse. The building shudders violently. Glass splinters inward, debris flying. Inside, buyers and sellers alike are thrown, collapsing onto the marble floor. But not all of them stay down. Ethan watches as bodies begin to convulse, limbs twitching unnaturally. Then they rise. Benji yells, "Ethan, move! Now!" Part 2. The first victims convulse, spasming violently, bones snapping as their bodies twist into something unnatural, followed by screams, blood, and frenzy. They don't simply turn, they attack. Within seconds, the newly infected lunge at those still human, ripping into flesh, pulling victims down before they even have a chance to run. A buyer tries to flee, only to be caught mid-stride and dragged into the chaos. "Ethan, listen to me. Full transformation takes 1 to 2 minutes. After that, they lose all human cognition. Heavy weapons on the chopper above. You're gonna need them." Ethan is already moving, climbing fast, aiming for the rooftop. Local response? The military is being informed. But brace yourself. They're discussing building-wide containment, which means no one leaves. Ethan lunges upward, gripping onto steel framework, scaling toward the rooftop chopper. But the infected notice him. A horde charges toward the windows, slamming against reinforced glass. "Relax, Ethan. They won't get through," followed by a large crack appearing in front of Ethan's face. "Benji, it's not holding." The glass buckles, and several zombies burst through, bodies tumbling outward. Ethan reacts quickly, twisting and dodging teeth, kicking them off balance as they fall to their deaths below. He clambers up onto the rooftop, just as the last infected crashes through, creating a mound of corpses somewhere far below. Ethan approaches a weapon crate inside the chopper. Tactical gear and ammunition. He finally has firepower. Ethan grips a rifle, scanning the rooftop perimeter. Ethan, the building is going to be destroyed. Ethan hesitates. There are thousands of uninfected civilians on the floors below. You only have minutes. If you get to the antidote 5 floors down, prove it works. Maybe we can convince them to hold off the strike. Ethan checks his rifle's magazine is full, and then turns to see a swarm of infected spill onto the roof. He opens fire. He's not escaping. He's going in. Part 3. Ethan shoots his way into the building and is met by unexpected silence. He moves carefully now, pressing against the wall, scanning ahead. The infected are lurking, some motionless. Benji's voice cracks in over the comms. Ethan, we're running out of time. Aircraft incoming. The military will destroy the building if they have to. We need proof of an antidote. Room 47, B. The insider is waiting. Ethan stays low, running silently along a corridor with flickering lights. There's movement behind him, a deep, guttural sound. He turns to see 3 infected charge after him. Elevator on your left. Ethan struggles to open the door to a service elevator. The infected are almost upon him. He forces open the shaft, hands gripping steel, muscles straining, then slides inside. The doors close automatically behind him. As the infected slam into it, screaming and clawing at the door, Ethan slides down the elevator wires. Random crashes and screams can be heard from the corridors he passes. He emerges onto the floor with the antidote, scanning his surroundings. This floor seems empty. Ethan reaches room 47B and kicks the door open, and then stops. Nothing. No case. No antidote. No insider. The room is empty. Where is it? A silence. A deep inhale on the comms. I read it wrong. It's not 47B, it's B47, another 5 floors down. The words hit like a gunshot. Then, movement. A shadow shifting in the side room. Ethan doesn't see it coming. Part 4. Ethan stumbles back, his breathing uneven, his arm burning. He looks down. The bite. Before the infected can lunge again, he grabs it, now angry, and twists till the monster's neck snaps. The creature crumples, unmoving. Benji's voice is strained in his ear. You have 2 minutes, and 5 minutes until the military blows the whole building. They think the outbreak is contained to the top 10 floors. If you can prove the antidote works, they won't destroy it. Ethan locks onto the nearest window, his only chance for speed. He sprints full force, rifle raised, firing into the glass until it shatters into shards. He then drops his weapon and dives straight through. The world plummets around him, 5 floors down, but moving fast, and he slams hard against the building, ribs screaming in protest as his magnets kick in. For half a second, his grip slips. He desperately takes hold of the steel framework, holding on, barely. He activates the glass cutter, but doesn't have time for a clean slice, and smashes the device into the nearest window, his desperate power causing it to break. With one final pull, he clambers inside. 60 seconds, Ethan. Ethan can feel it, the heat rising in his blood, the unnatural pulse creeping in. He moves fast, searching the room until he finds the case he is looking for and rips is open. But before he can inject himself, a figure moves. A woman, a scientist, the insider. But something is wrong. She's infected. She lunges forward, grabbing for him, crazed. Ethan grapples against her, fighting back, but his strength is slipping, his vision blurring. The infection is taking him. Benji's voice fades in the background. He stares at the injector. One chance. He forces the needle into his arm and presses the trigger. A breath. Then clarity. The fever vanishes. His pulse steadies. But the insider is still attacking. Ethan turns and injects her too. For a moment, she convulses. Then she stops, breathing, eyes clearing. She is human again. Ethan, it worked! The military is standing down! Ethan exhales, rolling his head back against the wall, as military jets swoop past outside. Then, after a pause, he looks around. The infected are still everywhere. Hunley is requesting you inject the antidote into everyone else before you come down. Ethan pulls himself to his feet and rolls his eyes. Of course he is. The end. Napoleon Bonaparte's Private Diary, March 3rd, 1817. Location: a French frigate approaching the shores of America. Mood: triumphant, underappreciated, and slightly seasick. At last, America, a land that claims to love greatness, yet foolishly lacks an emperor. My escape from St. Helena was effortless. My British captors, dull men with weak tea, never suspected a genius such as myself would be able to fake illness and vanish under the cover of night. I have assembled my loyal forces, claimed a ship, and now Louisiana awaits me. Upon landing, I shall declare myself governor. Unlike these Americans, I understand that power must be taken, and not begged for through tiresome debates. If necessary, I will graciously allow them to vote for my leadership, though the outcome is obvious. I am Napoleon. I am brilliant. And I wear the best hats. Victory is inevitable. These simple Americans will rejoice upon witnessing my superiority, my vision, my ability to restore civilization. Let them choose greatness. Napoleon Bonaparte's Private Diary, March 7th, 1817. Location: the streets of New Orleans. Mood: increasingly baffled. After several victorious battles, my forces now control key territories across the American South. My power has successfully spread, yet the people here still fail to fully acknowledge my greatness. I walked among the people today, expecting a hero's welcome, grand bows and cries of admiration. Instead, I was greeted with indifference. As I marched through the marketplace, I awaited wide-eyed amazement. Instead, a merchant asked me if I was lost. Lost? Napoleon does not get lost. The world revolves around him. I encountered a street musician playing some horrific, chaotic nonsense. Some kind of African drumming. I demanded opera. The musician laughed. The crowd laughed. Then they booed. Napoleon has never been booed before. An insult to civilization itself. A tavern offered me whiskey. I nearly died. This is not wine. This is an assault on the senses. Yet here they drink it freely, like fools embracing poison. I then met a local mayor, expecting him to take a knee, perhaps an offer of land. But no, he shook my hand aggressively, called me Nap, and slapped me on the back as if I were some ordinary man. I nearly executed him on the spot. And the worst part? Alligators. These beasts roam freely, lounging in the sun like lazy soldiers refusing to report for duty. When I suggested their removal, the people mocked me. They do not fear the gators. They embrace them. They wear them as boots. A civilization this reckless surely cannot survive. Clearly they require education. I shall host a grand ball, one so magnificent, so refined, so utterly European, that they will finally understand what true culture looks like. Then I shall begin to fix everything that is wrong with this country. Napoleon Bonaparte's Private Diary, March 10th, 1817. Location, New Versailles, Louisiana. Mood, betrayed, hungover, and questioning existence. The Palace of Versailles was proof that civilization could be molded by the hands of genius. It was stolen from me by ungrateful men and a revolution fueled by ignorance. So now, here in Louisiana, I have renamed the Cabildo New Versailles and filled it with mirrors and chandeliers. It is now a place where the people will recognize true majesty once more. Through a lavish ball, I attempted to educate them, to lift them from their ignorance, to turn these unruly citizens into proper subjects worthy of my rule. I informed them that a man's greatness is reflected in his coat. Did they listen? I was surrounded by cowboys, pirates, and, mon Dieu, a man in a raccoon hat. A raccoon hat! Civilization is surely dying before my eyes. I graciously taught them the correct way to hold a fork. They mocked me, choosing to eat corn dodgers with their hands, as if they were wild animals feasting upon a carcass. I attempted discussions on philosophy and military strategy, yet they insisted on talking about baseball, whiskey, and a local man named Big Hank, who once wrestled a bear. My final attempt was to request a proper waltz, but they began square dancing instead. I demanded structure, but they spun in reckless circles, laughing and stomping like lunatics. And my greatest shame? Ah, yes. I called an election after one guest declared that leaders should be elected. Fueled by wine and frustration, I myself declared, "Fine, let them vote. They will obviously choose me." Before I could finish my speech, a rival had emerged, some tavern owner promising free drinks. I realized my error too late. Now I sit in New Versailles, nursing what appears to be a hangover induced by both wine and disappointment. The election takes place next week, but I am still Napoleon. I am inevitable. Napoleon Bonaparte's Private Diary, March 17th, 1817. Location, New Versailles, now mostly on fire. Mood, confused. It appears my reign has ended. I had graciously allowed the people to vote, believing they would naturally choose the superior candidate, me. And yet, as the numbers were counted, it became clear I was losing to a man whose only political promise was cheaper drinks. So, like any great leader facing injustice, I did what history would expect. I shot the tavern owner. In retrospect, this was poorly received. The people now riot outside, the flames consuming my grand palace as my soldiers desert me one by one. Now, as I sit at my desk, occasionally dodging falling embers, I must reflect. Had I been wrong about democracy? Should freedom truly include the ability to not like Napoleon? How likely is it that I will now be fed to an alligator? A bottle of whiskey sits beside me. I had once declared it an insult to fine drinking, but now, as the world collapses around me, it is strangely comforting. The smoke from the riots carries the scent of barbecue. I had once called it a disgrace to cuisine, and yet it is, admittedly, not terrible. Perhaps America is too wild, too reckless, too stubborn to be ruled by a single man. Perhaps these people have always thrived on chaos, and perhaps they should be ruled by a man promising free drinks instead. The end. The call of the river. The Mississippi River churns violently below, reflecting the flickering golden glow of lanterns strung across the grand riverboat. Inside the vessel, the party rages on. Rose, radiant as ever, entertains guests in a world of crystal glasses, violins, and polite laughter, her voice carrying through the wooden halls. But outside, At the very edge of the boat, Jack stands alone. He smirks bitterly, shaking his head. Was this what survival meant? Did fate save him, only to mock him now? His gaze flickers downward. The river roars below, calling to him. A power within him urges him forward. Jack climbs over the outer railing and holds out his arms, the wind pressing against him, lifting his coat, just as Rose had once done on the ship where their story began. It really did feel like flying. And then Jack falls forward into the river.
Context. The Titanic, deemed unsinkable, was the largest and most luxurious ship of its time, a floating palace that symbolized both grandeur and hubris. But on April 15, 1912, it struck an iceberg and sank, becoming one of history's greatest maritime disasters. Jack Dawson was a free-spirited artist who won his third-class ticket onto the Titanic in a poker game. Bold, adventurous, and intensely romantic, he taught Rose DeWitt Bucata, a wealthy young woman trapped by expectation, how to embrace life beyond privilege. Their love defied class divides, but ultimately, Jack sacrificed himself, freezing in the Atlantic Sea to ensure Rose's survival. In this story, Jack survived the sinking of the Titanic. Now married to Rose, he wishes he hadn't.
Part 1. The Unwanted Celebration. Jack leans against the iron gate, watching as the travelling jazz musicians load their instruments onto a worn, horse-drawn carriage, bound for a town downriver. The Mississippi dusk settles, the distant hum of cicadas mixing with the lazy rhythm of their voices. "You better come by, Dawson," the trumpet player teases, slapping the side of the carriage. "Rich folk don't understand real music." Jack grins, shaking his head. "You don't know the half of it." Before he can say more, the housekeeper approaches, hesitating before speaking. "Mr. Jack," she says carefully, "Miss Rose wants to speak with you." "Let me guess," he mutters, rubbing the back of his neck. "She's got plans." The musicians laugh knowingly, one shaking his head. "You ain't got a birthday, Dawson. You got a boss." Jack chuckles, clapping one of them on the shoulder. "Don't leave town before talking to me," he tells the band. "I might need you." Inside, the piano room glows with warm candlelight, the scent of polished mahogany thick in the air. Rose turns to him, eyes bright with excitement. "Jack! Wonderful news!" Jack already doesn't like the sound of it. "The governor has offered his riverboat for your birthday this weekend." Jack groans, sinking into the nearest chair. Rose winces. "Jack, you know that's not a chair for sitting." Jack looks around, confused. He then sighs and stands up, before moving to the acceptable chair and sitting back down. "I was hoping to watch Dixieland play this weekend," he mutters, rubbing his temple. Rose waves a hand dismissively. "Oh, you know that's not real music, Jack." Jack stares at her, incredulous. "You wound me, Rose." She smirks, unfazed. "The governor has plans for you, Jack. You simply must accept the riverboat." Jack stares up at the ceiling, wishing he could disappear. Rose just smiles. Part 2. The Last Attempt. Jack adjusts the cuff of his fine jacket, the fabric stiff, unfamiliar. Just another part of this world that still doesn't fit him. The house is silent, except for the faint hum of music drifting from far beyond the estate. A distant band playing somewhere downriver, the melody barely reaching him. He stands at the top window, gazing out. The Mississippi stretches like liquid gold in the fading sun, untamed and free. Unlike him. Rose steps in, her presence light, effortless, as if nothing is wrong. Jack turns to her. "What happened to the woman I fell in love with?" Rose raises an eyebrow, amused. "Jack, don't be dramatic." Jack doesn't smile. "We had life on the Titanic. We had everything." She shrugs, unbothered. "It was fun, Jack. A vacation. But real life needs society, progress, stability." Jack exhales slowly. He feels the floor beneath his feet, the weight of his future closing in. Rose steps closer, placing a hand on his arm. "This deal with the governor will secure our life for decades." Jack nods absently. Decades, huh? But in the depths of his mind, a different scenario unfolds. What if he simply shoved her out of the window? Just a small push, and then shock, sorrow, whispers of tragedy. He could say she fell. How terrible, how devastating. Or maybe he could sink the entire riverboat that evening and take them all down with it. "Do you genuinely think jazz isn't real music?" Rose pauses, considering, then smiles brightly. "Oh, Jack, it's just noise that poor people dance to." Jack stares, silent. Rose continues, "Now come on, everyone's waiting." Jack looks out the window again. Maybe he should throw himself out. Part 3. The River's Mercy. Jack steps out onto the side balcony of the riverboat, the murmur of conversation spilling into the humid night air. Inside, the party continues. Laughter, pleasantries, polished silverware clinking against fine china, a celebration of a man he no longer recognizes. The first of a lifetime of birthdays like this. Champagne toasts filled with empty compliments, business partnerships disguised as friendships, conversations about nothing. Jack swigs from his whiskey bottle, the burn offering the only real sensation he's felt all evening. The music from upstream is gone, swallowed by the river's growing roar. He steps toward the railing, checking the bank. Soon they'll hit the stronger rapids. The boat rocks slightly, a warning. Jack stares at the rushing black water, the endless movement, the force dragging everything downriver, toward the unknown. And suddenly, a thought grips him. What if fate had meant for him to die that night? What if that had been a mercy in disguise? The riverboat lurches, the waters below furious, pulling him forward. Jack climbs over the outer railing and holds out his arms, the wind pressing against him, lifting his coat, just as Rose had once done on the ship where their story began. It really did feel like flying. For the first time in years, he feels free. Someone screams behind him. And then Jack falls forward, into the river. Part 4. A new path. The river roars, pulling him under. For a moment, there is only silence beneath the chaos, only the rushing weight of cold water, the sudden realization that he has done it. He is free. Then, hands grab him, rough and strong, dragging him upward. Jack gasps for air, coughing, choking, until laughter fills his ears. "Well, hell, Dawson, you really are crazy." The Dixieland band, dripping wet from hauling him out, grins down at him, shaking their heads. "Jumping into the river is one thing," the trumpet player chuckles. "Jumping in to escape money? That's another level of stupid." Jack laughs, breathless. "At least now she can declare me dead." One of the musicians nudges his hat back. "Well, you better start working on your chops, Dawson. Ain't no room in this band for someone who can't play worth a damn." The band hoists him up onto their wagon, soaked and alive, the road ahead unfurling into the unknown. And just like that, Jack Dawson was gone. The end. Thank you for listening to this Hollow Crown tale. The realm holds many more stories, and its legends are waiting for you here. Alternatively, let me know in the comments if there is a particular tale you would like me to tell. The Waystation. Prologue. Edmund descended the steep wooden steps attached to the exterior of the Eldermore City Council building. He had nearly reached the cobbled streets below when a sharp crack echoed above. The sound of splintering timber as the city guards broke through the bolted door of his study. Someone had betrayed him. Edmund was a senior foreign diplomat for the Kingdom of Eldermore and was often stationed abroad. Because of this, his choice of workspace in the building had gone unquestioned. He had deliberately selected an obscure, dimly lit and perpetually damp chamber, tucked high in the roof. Chosen precisely for its proximity to the steps, they had been added to the back of the building after lightning had sparked several rooftop fires over a century ago, and were intended to provide swift access for water carriers during an emergency. From Edmund's workspace, the steps could only be reached by climbing out of his window and inching along a narrow ledge that curved around the corner of the building. It was a hazardous route, and one the city guard was unlikely to be aware of. He stepped off the final step into the quiet alley below, one of countless narrow passageways that crisscrossed the ancient heart of Eldermore City. Though it was daytime, little sunlight reached these alleys as the towering buildings above cast long, oppressive shadows. The result was a disorienting maze of winding paths, hidden nooks, and dead ends. A dusky labyrinth that Edmund had long since committed to memory. He had made a point of exploring every path, visiting every tavern, and charting every hidden corner. Quite literally, in fact. He had commissioned a map of the city that was almost certainly more detailed than the council's own. Edmund was a notably tall man, his well-tailored regalia hinting at his station. A neatly groomed beard framed his sharp jawline, and his intelligent eyes were set beneath dark brows that lent him an air of quiet authority. Yet, despite his composed appearance, his mind churned with urgency as he strode through the streets as fast as he dared, careful not to draw unwanted attention. He shouldn't have to run. He was a good man, and uncovering conspiracies against the crown was part of his duty. But it had always been a dangerous one. Eldermore, fortunately, was famed for its illustrious history of justice and fairness, a beacon of integrity in an age when other kingdoms fell to greed and corruption. The people of Eldermore took pride in their well-ordered society, where laws were upheld and enforced without prejudice. A kingdom without a king, Eldermore was governed instead by 5 princes, each ensuring that no single ruler wielded unchecked power. This delicate balance was carefully protected within the council chambers, where debates over morality and truth were fiercely contested. Yet, like any system, it was only a matter of time before someone sought to exploit or undermine it. That someone, in this case, was Duke Argyris of Aramor. Having likely uncovered Edmund's investigation, the Duke had retaliated by bringing false charges against him. Edmund was not overly troubled by his attempted arrest at the hands of the city guards. He was confident that once the council reviewed the evidence he had gathered, they would be compelled to act against Duke Argyris and reinstate him as a leading diplomat. He planned to pass the documents he now carried to another member of the Silver Talons, a covert network sworn to protect the rights of Eldermore's citizens, so they could complete his work. But Edmund's first priority was his son, Eldric. He needed to find him and get him to the city port. Eldermore was a just kingdom, but justice could be slow, and Edmund had no intention of spending that time rotting in a cell on fabricated charges. More importantly, he couldn't risk leaving Eldrick behind, exposed to the Duke's wrath in his absence. Thankfully, Eldrick was spending this particular day practicing his oratory skills with Sir Gareth Hawke, a distinguished lawyer, at Hawke Manor on the outskirts of the city. Eldrick aspired to join the Hall of Justice as a junior counsel when he turned 21 later that year, though he worried his public speaking skills might not be strong enough. Embarrassed by this perceived shortcoming, he had insisted that his practice sessions remain a secret. Edmund reached Hawke Manor by the quickest route, avoiding any encounters with the city guards, and growing increasingly confident that he could leave Eldermore unchallenged. In a side courtyard, he found Sir Gareth guiding Eldrick through a speech, adjusting his son's posture with precision. Eldrick's slender frame, blonde hair, and delicate, refined features bore an unmistakable resemblance to his mother, a likeness that often pained Edmund, though he kept such feelings to himself. He hoped that in time his son might grow into a more authoritative presence, particularly before entering the chambers. Beside him stood Sir Gareth Hawke, broad-shouldered and commanding, a famed lawyer who exuded strength, wisdom, and gravitas. Edmund greeted Sir Gareth and his son, quickly explaining that he and Eldrick needed to sail for Sindara at nightfall. "I'm afraid that doesn't look likely, old friend," Sir Gareth said, his voice weighted with regret. Edmund turned to see several city guardsmen sweep into the manor grounds. The sheer number of soldiers was alarming, and he couldn't help but wonder what exactly the Duke had accused him of. One thing was certain: it was Lady Margaret who had betrayed him. She was the only one who knew Eldrick would be here today. It was a bitter realization, not just for the betrayal itself, but for the harsh truth that an enemy could corrupt someone of her standing in Eldermore. The guardsmen fanned out across the manor grounds, forcing Edmund to change his plans. "Eldrick, take this satchel," Edmund said, handing over his sleek leather bag. "It contains 7 letters. You must deliver them to a small outpost in Aramore. The details are inside. The responses should be more than enough to secure my release and initiate proceedings against Duke Argyris." "Proceedings?" Eldrick repeated, his expression one of utter confusion. "If this is the Duke's doing, he may try to have your father extradited to Aramore," Sir Gareth added. "It's an act I can delay for up to 10 days, so please ensure you have returned before that time comes to pass, just to be safe." Eldermore was bordered by several smaller vassal kingdoms, the most powerful of which was the military-focused Aramore. Technically larger than Eldermore, if one included the vast forests of the wilds that lay to its north, Aramore was ruled by a duke with a ruthless, militant mindset. Unlike Eldermore, Aramore had no ethical commitment to justice, and extradition there, though rare, could easily mean death. 2 of the city guards approached the side courtyard. "Whatever I am accused of will undoubtedly be false, but the council will take any accusation seriously," Edmund explained to his son. "They will likely want to question you as part of their investigation, so travel in disguise if you can to avoid delay. Perhaps as a mail rider, since you will be delivering letters on behalf of the crown." Sir Gareth approached the large statue of Astrea, the goddess of wisdom and truth, that occupied the center of the courtyard. He slid open a concealed door at the base of the statue and gestured for Eldrick to hide inside. "In here," he ordered. Eldrick glanced at Edmund, who nodded in agreement, and watched as his son climbed into the small, hidden compartment. The poor boy was clearly at a loss for words as Gareth slid the door shut, sealing him inside. "Edmund Thane?" an official voice called as the 2 members of the city guard stepped into the courtyard. "I am Edmund Thane," Edmund replied, his tone light, almost amused. "You are under arrest for crimes against the Crown." "Please come with me, sir," the guard stated, his expression unreadable. "I will be representing the accused in the chamber," Sir Gareth interjected. "Please state the charges plainly." "Prince Valen has made amendments to the Judiciary Act," the guard responded. "Charges of treason need not be detailed at the point of arrest." "Treason?" Sir Gareth repeated, his voice thick with disbelief. The second guard gave the first a sharp shove on the shoulder, a gesture that seemed like an admonishment. The first guard, now looking visibly uneasy, stammered, Look, you just have to come with us, sir." Sir Gareth sighed and shook his head. "Well, this is certainly going to be interesting, old friend." "Fear not," said Edmund. "Eldermore stands firm because it is built upon truth and justice. No falsehood can endure where the light of truth prevails." He turned as though to address the statue of Astrea, the goddess who stood behind him, delicately poised with a scroll in one hand and a lantern in the other. "We must trust in the system. It may bend under the weight of deceit, but it does not break," Eldrick whispered to himself from inside the statue. "Justice endures as long as there are those willing to uphold it." The guards were respectful of Edmund, allowing him to walk freely between them as they crossed the carefully tended gardens of Hawk Manor. As they approached the front gates, Edmund's heart skipped a beat. He thought he had caught a glimpse of a figure clad in blackened armor, hovering near the entrance. Surely not. The iron hand held no jurisdiction in Eldermore. He must have been mistaken. Chapter 1. The Arrival. The Waystation stood as a silent sentinel at the remote crossroads. Its timbered walls and gnarled wooden beams groaned under the weight of time. In the distance, a cluster of smaller, weather-beaten buildings huddled together, their shutters closed against the crisp chill that had settled in the air. Beyond them lay the wilds, a vast and ancient forest whose true size remained unknown. Just past its shadowy tree line, a guardian's watchtower loomed, a solitary figure against the fading light of a peaceful late autumn evening. The tranquility was shattered by the sound of Frost's hooves thundering along the beaten path. The sleek and powerful horse bore the marks of a hard ride, his breath billowing in the cold air as he galloped across a moss-covered bridge. Eldrick, a young man of 20, sat tall in the saddle. While slim and wiry like most male riders, his smooth features betrayed an upbringing unaccustomed to the trials of the open road. His blonde hair framed a determined expression, with a steely resolve in his blue eyes. Eldrick pulled Frost to a stop outside the Waystation, taking a moment to survey the scene. After a day of listening to Frost's hooves pounding the earth, the sudden silence felt a little unnerving. An enormous willow tree loomed by the inn's entrance. Its twisted branches cast shadows that danced across the dirt road. Above the Waystation door, a wooden sign swung gently in the breeze, its faded lettering revealing the name. The Wayward Willow. He had finally arrived. Eldrick dismounted, tying Frost to a post and patting the horse's neck. "I'll be right back." The Waystation's heavy wooden doors creaked as he pushed them open to reveal a warm, flickering light within. He was greeted by a spacious tavern that occupied the ground floor, where the faint aroma of roasting meat mingled with the scent of ale and pipe smoke. There were few patrons this time of year, so the wooden tables and chairs scattered throughout the common area were largely empty. The walls were adorned with faded tapestries and hunting trophies, and a large stone hearth dominated one wall. Beside it, a hooded man sat, gently strumming a lute in quiet melancholy, the soothing notes of the instrument blending with the comforting heat of the fire. Two rugged-looking men sat at the bar, drinking and laughing, while the innkeeper lit lanterns to ward off the growing darkness. The shelves behind the innkeeper were lined with an assortment of bottles and flagons, filled with various ales and brews. "Good evening, sir," Eldrick called out. The innkeeper was a large, bear-like man with a kind face, who chuckled in response. "Evening, traveller. We heard you charging along the path from a mile away. What brings you to the Wayward Willow in such haste?" Eldrick puffed out his chest and began his well-rehearsed arrival speech. "My name is Eldrick Thane, male rider for the crown, and I have ridden for 3 days." He paused as the innkeeper smiled. The men at the bar had also turned their heads, their expressions a mixture of amusement and fascination. Eldrick's palms grew clammy, and his mind scrambled to recall the rest of his practiced lines, but his voice faltered. Is there something you find amusing?" Eldrick ended up asking them. "Just never heard a male rider quite so well spoken," the innkeeper replied. "Well, perhaps the kingdom has raised its standards for who gets to represent the crown," Eldrick snapped. Immediately regret washed over him. Sir Gareth often reminded him that letting emotions disrupt his thoughts was a weakness. Eldrick exhaled slowly, silently berating himself for losing composure so easily. The innkeeper remained unperturbed as he finished lighting another lantern. "No offence intended, young master. Gregor's the name. I own this establishment. Now, what have you come to deliver?"